saved it to a storage device and shipped it over. I used to do that with pirated computer games for my Amiga back in the day, right? So, same thing.
The file system and the way, they write to disks initially. And there was a lot about writing to spinning disk because that could get you good performance, really good performance out of pretty shitty or slow hardware. So that was a very clever way. Which you needed to do this back in the day. NFS over Ethernet in the mid-1990s was fast enough for any application. And it still is. So the industry kind of led the customers into something that was never needed.
I'm still all for separating storage traffic and normal network traffic, but you can still do that and use Ethernet for both.
And nobody ever talks to the backup guys because they're just a different team as well. So we just don't talk to backup guys.
It's the most horrible thing you can ever do.
Thank you so much.
No,
thank you.
You have an area which is super hot.
I've always had an area that is super hot. So you just weren't down with the kids.
Oh no, you didn't. You didn't.
Welcome to this podcast, and today again we are lucky enough to have Per Sedin, our Vice President of Technology and Services for Proact. Yes, wave to the camera, everybody please. Everybody please wave to the camera. Thank you very much, guy. And Per's here today to talk to us about, during the last podcast we talked about his 30 years at Proact, which is an insane amount of time.
It's actually all the years.
All the years that Proact's been running, yes.
It shows.
He's only 35. I mean, it's quite impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been hard years, as you can see.
And but today, what we wanted to focus on more than anything else was NetApp, because obviously NetApp have been a massive partner of Proact, certainly over the last 20 years. But am I right in saying that we've been working with NetApp for 27 years, Per? Is that correct?
I think it's 27 years and counting, yeah. So not the first couple of years, which we might touch on, but yeah, a 27-year partnership, and it's not without its challenges, of course, over the years, but it keeps growing at the end of the day. So that's quite amazing, and probably not really what we kind of foresaw when we took the joint decision 27 years ago, but here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So technology-wise, what did the business focus on? We've covered it a little bit in the previous podcast, but what did the business focus on to start off with the pre-NetApp?
Yeah, you're saying, what we did before NetApp. It was, I think the idea, and this might sound very old, and it is, it was the idea that you will take the file servicing out of general purpose servers because they were quite inefficient in doing file services. What are we talking about? The early Unix days, Sun microsystem, of course. And then I think there was originally a company called Auspex who came with the idea that we can do this better by serving in, it was NFS in those days. This was before Microsoft was there. And so we can do it by doing a general purpose file server. We can do it much better, faster, more efficiently. This was, of course, coming out of the idea, and we come much further since then, but about sharing. You wanted a common space where you can start sharing things. Very much engineering driven, chip design, software development. So it was about having a common place where you can share files. And NFS was, there were other protocols, but that was becoming the de facto standard. And it was not owned by anyone, so it worked.
That's insane, isn't it? Is the fact that these days that's ubiquitous. Everything is all about sharing. But to think that back 27 years ago, in reality, it hadn't really been invented. It was one of those things where everybody kept their own files and maybe sent files from one person to another. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't suppose email was a particularly large thing back then either. But
I saved it to a storage device and shipped it over. I used to do that with pirated computer games for my Amiga back in the day, right? So, same thing. Before the internet, we used the postal service. That's how it is.
Before Netflix, we all sent DVDs in the post, that sort of stuff.
There you go. And actually, that is actually how Netflix started. They did some.
Exactly.
And I think was it like earlier this year, I think they finally stopped selling DVDs. So they kept it on the side, I guess, for all this time.
So why? Obviously, Auspex was a business that you were dealing with. So why switch from Auspex to NetApp? What did NetApp offer?
Yeah, and I think you have to realize Auspex in the early Proact days was probably 70% of our revenue, so it was pretty important. We knew about NetApp, of course, at the time we started Proact. So they started a couple of years earlier, so they were aware, especially Auspex made us aware of NetApp because they were starting to lose some deals in the US. So we started to hear them, there was a lot about competitive talks about NetApp coming from the US. And we said, NetApp, that's interesting. Or we was called Network Appliance or NAC or NAC in those days. And so we it got our attention. So our current vendor talked so much about one of the competitors that we actually got interested in the competitor. And I think also that, and there were also some, and you couldn't really carry both. So this was a kind of a big decision for us because the CEO and the CTO and the people writing the code and running the business, they came from Auspex. So there was a massive conflict. I'm sure they were probably suing each other. This is America. So you couldn't work with both, that you had to pick one. And of course, this being, 70% of our business the first couple of years, we're starting to see customers saying, because there was a local small partner starting to do NetApp since we didn't. So we actually had local competition there. And we were hearing from Ericsson and others saying, we like the idea of NetApp. And what they liked was, Auspex was done in bespoke hardware, so they really did. It was special design hardware. There was SunOS in there. SunOS, this was before Solaris, so some of you might be that old. And then everything else, was done in special designed ASICs. So very fast, but quite expensive and inflexible. NetApp did it on a software, on standard PCs, x86, even back then. So it was really kind of a software layer, software defined what they did. So they did it very differently than Auspex did. Much smaller, absolutely not at the scale. So they were coming in the smaller installations, not at the center, and small work groups, or so they were kind of small file servers they were putting left and right. So we're kind of eating their way into the center. At the same time, Auspex, they don't exist anymore, so I'm sure I can tell this. They were failing on the technical development. They tried to move from SunOS to Solaris. They tried to implement SMB, was the file sharing protocol from Microsoft, and they weren't on it. And NetApp, surprise, doing it all in software, were much faster in implementing these changes, and also simpler, easier to use, easier to manage. You don't need to be super expert. So I think you can probably, you can see that happening over the years. Now NetApp might be perceived as more advanced or difficult to manage than some options in the market. But back then they were really simple. And I think the first NetApp, you got like 4 or 5 diskettes, 3.5-inch diskettes. That's how we installed all of it, all the software. So so it was a combination of us hearing it, we were hearing customer talking about it, and we were saying, we need to change. And our CEO back then, Henrik, said, are you absolutely mad? It's 70% on the money. We can't change. But a couple of years down the line, we did a switch. But also there was a small, I think there were 3 people. Well, we were like 12, so not that much smaller than we were. But they instead of doing a hostile thing, we actually bought that company. And I'm still friends with those guys, so they're not with Proact anymore. They left a long time ago. But so we bought that small company. So instead of creating conflict locally, we bought that company, and off we went in 1997, I think it was.
Whoa, 1997. So NetApp was essentially you bought it as software. They didn't sell hardware like they do today.
Oh yeah, no, they sold an appliance. So it was called Network Appliance.
Yes,
it was all packaged as an appliance. So it was software defined but still packaged, a little bit like you've seen with some of the VMware stuff. You can sell the software, but there is also an appliance package, which I think has actually been the big seller the market. So no, it was absolutely an appliance.
Nice.
It was.
But it was based upon a
hardware,
standard
software
hardware.
integrated. You bought it as a solution. You had support and all of that included. So that's how they took it to market, and I guess mostly still do.
But that's I guess I digress a bit. But I mean, since NetApp's ONTAP operating system is based on x86, this is also why you can do NetApp in the cloud without having to rewrite anything, right? Because it's the same hypervisor kind of way of running it anyway, so you can run it anywhere. Exactly. Which is also why one of the reasons I think that NetApp has been able to survive for this long, because they actually have the portability of their code to provide that file service regardless of the hardware as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating, really, is the fact that they've not changed that methodology, have they? Because essentially they're still software defined. I think a lot of businesses, certainly large corporations, tend to sort of adjust as they go. So they might start off being software defined and then think, no, we're going to do some things in hardware because it's faster. When they change to Flash, for example, they may well have thought, well, okay, let's fundamentally change the way that we do our architecture. But they haven't really. They've kept everything software defined.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, underneath it, Unix, some open source stuff underneath it, it is proprietary code, of course, in NetApp, but, underlying what was, early open source Unix system as the foundation. So that's how it got started. So I guess a good architecture, and they had a software defined version. So you have been able to buy the software, but I think with most storage vendor, they have limited the software, and it actually turned out to be as expensive, if not more expensive, to buy the software and hardware and to buy the whole appliance. So they really compete with themselves. But to your point, Christian, but when they really got traction when they put it in the hyperscalers, and I think they've done a really good job. So you have the flexibility, you can have the movement of data, the data management, the data efficiencies, regardless of where you put it. On an appliance, on local standard hardware, and of course in the hyperscalers where we see the traction.
Sorry, you keep the same management plane regardless of how you deployed it, right? So, exactly. But that is a testament to how that NetApp ONTAP operating system has been designed from the ground up, right? That it's been able to survive for 27 years. Well, it wasn't ONTAP back then, but you get the gist of it, right? It's kind of the same thing and has been all along, and it's been able to scale and move with the market.
It was actually ONTAP back then. ONTAP is the original. Yeah. They modified it. They've integrated some acquisitions to make it clusterly scalable. But it is ONTAP. So the foundation, the file system and the way, they write to disks initially. And there was a lot about writing to spinning disk because that could get you good performance, really good performance out of pretty shitty or slow hardware. So that was a very clever way. Which you needed to do this back in the day because this was long before Flash.
Exactly. Flash
so how you did the disk layout and how you optimized the IOs out on the disk, was a big chunk of it. But of course, and this is the big difference. Back then in the mid 1990s, the rest of the storage market went for something else, which is called SAN, which was the fiber channel SAN, and saying, okay, we're gonna we have this very fast hardware, and we're going to do it in hardware, and we put the file system, so to say, and this is the point, for you geeks out there. It is the placement of the file system, which is the big difference between fiber channel and NAS. NetApp, with NetApp, the file system is on the NetApp. On SAN, the file system is on the server, whatever flavor you use. And that is a massive technical difference, and that, of course, enable NetApp early on to do all these clever things, when they mapped out the drives, when they can actually do very efficient, very powerful snapshots, which is also one of the fundamental technologies that they've been enhancing over the decades and really stayed on top of that one. So a very software-enabled snapshot technology from the start. So there were some clever design ideas there.
And as you said, not the need for another layer of networking, because the whole fiber channel setup also was very expensive, wasn't it? To get it done right, and multiple locations and so on.
I think Fiber Channel was the most horrible idea for customers ever invented in the storage space. And most of them went for it because they went for a different networking technology, which they thought was needed for performance. It wasn't really. So they made it more expensive, more complex to manage because they already had something called Ethernet back then. And it was really good enough for most everything back in the day. And today it's still the same old. And when SON was coming out, the customer says, I'm going to have SON because HP and IBM and everyone, EMC, everyone is promoting this. And I said, why? It's faster. What do you mean? And, they never needed a performance, and it wasn't actually faster in reality. NFS over Ethernet in the mid-1990s was fast enough for any application, and it still is. But here we go. So it was the industry kind of led the customers into something that was never needed, another network technology that was never needed. But this is still an argument 30 years later.
Yeah.
So there you go.
But it was perfect for consultants like me.
Yeah.
Who could do a lot of billable hours configuring fiber channel switches and HBAs and everything. Because no one on the customer side of things really understood anything of it. No. So they had to hire someone to get it set up.
Yeah.
So it was perfect for that, of course. But I'm still all for separating storage traffic and normal network traffic on different paths and everything, and not just join everything into the same kind of IO blender thing. But you can still do that and use Ethernet for both.
I completely agree with you on that one, Christian. It was, but I think it also played in the hands of the conflicts with internal IT. You have the networking team, and they did not want to touch the storage, whatever that is, And then of course you have the storage team, who the networking team never would talk to because they thought it was kind of very unimportant. So they said, let's build our own network, so we don't have to talk to these not so friendly network engineers, So it kind of played into the hands of a dysfunctional organization with most IT organizations. So it was a clever move by IBM and HP and EMC and the rest. Clever, very clever.
And nobody ever talks to the backup guys because they're just a different team as well. So we just don't talk to backup guys.
Backup is the most horrible thing you can ever do.
Thank you so much. No, thank you. Thank you. Specialist. That sort of stuff.
However, 30 years later, Tony, finally, you have an area which is super hot.
I know, well, I've always had an area that is super hot. You just weren't down with the kids.
Oh no, you didn't. You didn't.
But that's also interesting, actually, because if we look at it, we've been doing Proact's been around for 30 years. The basis of Proact was basically data management and data security when it started. Proact has kind of grown a bit since then, but the core of our business is still actually data protection. Regardless of how we kind of protect it, it's still data protection and data security. It takes on different flavors and different kind of iterations. There might be SOC services, and it might be backup consultancy. It might be backup as a service, as a managed service. But the core of all of that is protecting our customers' data. That's it. And that's pretty much the business idea as far as I've been able to understand it. And it's still the same thing.
At day one, yeah. Yeah, it's quite impressive, isn't
it? Probably not everyone agree. We made acquisitions where you come from a slightly different perspective or a very different perspective. However, whatever way you look at it, the amount of money, the amount of customers, data and data management is still a big chunk and very important part of our business. Then it can be deployed over a hybrid cloud, left and right. But it's still contemporary. I mean, maybe some of you guys know. I helped build our container platform as a service a couple of years ago, and Tony, you were very much involved in that one. How do you build applications using containers architectures, and how do you test it? How do you operate it? We built that as a service, and part of that one is a integration, programmatic integration to NetApp. And of course, that's for people who want storage and data protections. We can use the snapshot technology in the most modern application world you have ever seen so far. So it kind of goes with the iterations of IT. So I think they've been on it for quite some time. Surprised, I can say, we did not expect this to be, a growing business 27 years later when we started it. Well, storage and data management we always loved as the foundation of Proact, but we thought, NetApp, fantastic. They're going to be fine for a couple of years, then technology move on, that's going to be another partner. So we didn't see this coming as a long-term plan. We said, we adjusted and we change, but it's been working. Not without its struggles, of course. We've been disagreeing from time to time, obviously. But at the end of the day, I think we share this view of the world that, the ones and zeros that makes up your data and information is a pretty important one, and it's quite hard to do. And that's a foundation for whatever you do in IT.
I'm going to say
it's like any other marriage. I mean, it has its ups and downs, right? Yeah. It's how it is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is that like getting into bed with NetApp? Is that sort of situation? Is that the marriage analogy?
Well, and sometimes they call you father. In my case, I had, I think, 2 escalations to 2 different CEOs saying that Per doesn't believe in our new technology, which we acquired, so he's destroying our business. Happened at least twice, and that's fine, and it wasn't me, it was us, as Proact saying, they did something here and they bought something there, and we said, this is really bad, and we don't understand these acquisitions, that we're not going to focus on it. And they were really upset. In those cases, we were actually right, but they were not happy. So with us, of course, saying, no, we don't believe in that. But the core, the everything architecture around ONTAP in a hybrid cloud context, fantastic technology has been over many, many years.
Exactly. One of the things that is quite interesting is they've done very similar to what Proact do a little bit that you described in the last podcast, was the fact that sometimes we stopped and thought before we acted to make sure that we got it right when we moved. And I think NetApp were probably a little bit late to the party when it came to flash storage.
Oh yeah.
Because of the fact that, there were many other, there must have been 10 other flash providers that had sprouted up on the market. While NetApp were kind of getting there, they just weren't quite there yet. And I think we were sort of pushing them down that road and saying, come on, guys, you need to do this. But when they did get there, what they've done again with their software-defined storage works extremely well. It's incredibly efficient. It's very, very low latency. So they've caught up in the end, but it's one of those things where I think maybe all businesses just need to take a breath from time to time rather than pile into every possibility. And they have, as with all providers, maybe they made the odd mistake, but they're still heading in exactly the right same direction as the market is.
However, one of the times I've been extremely concerned was then where it was pretty obvious that Flash is going to be replacing spinning disk, and NetApp's, it's good to sometimes sit and think and ponder a little bit before you start running. Sometimes you need to get going. And I think in this case, we were really concerned that they were not getting going fast enough with all the startups coming up a decade or so ago. So that was, and they failed with their initial development. They're going to develop a separate platform, a separate architecture for Flash. That failed that project. Hopefully I don't get sued now, but I met the guy who was responsible for it, and that failed. So then they tweaked ONTAP to take advantage of Flash, and it worked beautifully. Better than I think you all expected. So there you go.
And also they've the large drive methodology. They were quite early to that. These massive drives that you can now get inside storage arrays. They beat a lot of the market to the market with that, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
To production
and that is really the trick, with NetApp, is because it's always been, storage with data management, or has it actually been data management with storage? I think that's probably more what we have sold over the years. And I think about the 30th anniversary, we had a discussion with one of our colleagues who's now been running a Linköping office for many, many years. He was a customer at Saab in Sweden in the early days, and I tried to convince him to buy the Auspex 9 gigabyte drives. and he was very reluctant because that would make the storage volume so big, so he would ruin his recovery SLAs. Because he could not recover in time. Yeah. However, all this was solved by something called snapshot technology, and an efficient snapshot technology. And you can say, okay, I can do an operational recovery. That was the original one, very, very quickly using snapshots. I don't have to read all the data back, So there were some really clever software functions that made a large drive viable in the environment, because this was a huge problem back then. You create a massive volume, and then you're going to recover that when something breaks. It would take hours.
Rebuilding time on that.
So there you go. So, Sorry, Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, so the rebuilding time of a failed drive or whatever in a RAID set back then. I mean, the amount of IOPS you could actually push through one of those drives were fairly noticeable, right? So
20.
Yeah,
right. That sort of stuff. Probably not very many.
No.
And that's a big thing. We still have that. I mean, it's been a challenge when large capacity SATA drives and nearline SAS drives came in. Sort of what are we up to now? 16, 18 terabyte drives. One drive. Imagine the rebuild time on that. It's got to be insane. But then you look at flash drives, and it's a different picture altogether. So much faster. But like I say, snapshot technology solves that problem. So does replication to a certain extent. But interesting stuff. So I mean, obviously, NetApp have over the years sort of bought different companies to do different things. They do SANs, the NetApp E series. They still sell SAN arrays if you wanted to buy a SAN array and not an on-tap array. We don't. We sell a few of those, but not as many as we do nearline on-tap arrays. But were there any other technologies that you've really liked over the years that maybe have or haven't worked for NetApp?
I think one of the challenges we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s was scalability, because they were running out of steam of the boxes. And we were actually looking at a competitor of NetApp back then, who had like a scale-out file system you can do for file servicing. So we were in the final negotiation phases with that company when NetApp bought them. And then that became how you started clustering. It took some time. So that was also a crucial technical evolution that was needed. And they so we looked at these guys, and they were bought by NetApp. It took a couple of years, but finally they I think it was called clustered data on tap CDOT in the early days. So that was one of the absolutely most important technologies they bought. I think that was crucial. I want to mention the ones that didn't really happen. I mean, they do SAN. I mean, but now they do. Right now, I think they repackaged and repurposed this the on-tap, so you can actually have an old SAN array which is still on-tap beneath it. So you also have you have the software functionality instead of having, like say, a pure SAN storage, which we do use. I think we use it especially in some of our services because it's effective and cost-effective storage. So absolutely, but it's probably not a big seller for us. Really. So I think probably what became clustered on tap. I think that was a key innovation.
They also leapt on the VMware bandwagon very quickly as well. They integrated with VMware very quickly, which was also a benefit for us, but also a benefit for all our customers, because when storage APIs and things of that sort of nature were being generated for VMware, NetApp were part of the team that were writing those APIs. And that made a big difference.
They've been really good at integrating. I mean, they've been excellent at integrating. I talked about containers, but all the time they've been really good at integrating into different technologies, kind of the whole ecosystem around them. We were not the least.
That goes for the backup part as well, right? So you can use NetApp's snapshotting and then offload that snapshot with the backup software.
Exactly.
Which leaves a lot less strain on the VMs or the storage array itself, but you still get all the data out of there without having to generate massive amounts of I/O for doing backups. So that's also one of the innovative things that has really helped the industry move forward in the storage industry in general. Basically, the idea of how to do that is a smart one, and it's still valid.
It absolutely is, and I think snapshots is not the solution for data protection. It's part of a solution, and what you're saying to get the full. And maybe we also have, you lock your file, you lock your data down. So we're doing a lot of more things now with ransomware, but that is some of the fundamental functionalities that they did not try to do everything themselves. They've been really good with partnerships. So that's also one of the things. And something else pops up on mind, with their metro cluster, when they are protecting, it has kind of synchronous replication and you can protect your environment. And when they did this in the late 90s, having a cluster back then, and I think the market leader back then was Sun, and they had, and I think it was also, and I think the clustering technologies that was available back then was massively complex. I think the uptime for the Sun cluster was lower than a single machine. It was that complicated, so that kind of defeats the whole purpose. And when NetApp came up with the Metro cluster, I remember I was there seeing the original or the beta version. It was dead simple, and I go like, wow. I mean, of course, less functionality than Sun had, but dead simple. It worked because it did very few things, but it did it well. So super simple. So they kept that simplicity high on the list. Some today might say they're complex compared to some of their competitors, but I think they are improving there. But simplicity, they've been really good at that over the years. And that's a very viable technology, especially in Europe. They have less interest in the US, but it's massive in Europe.
Really, that's bizarre because
they want to have longer distance. They want to have your geo protection. Metro clusters, since it's synchronous, you can't have that big distance because of the speed of light.
Yeah.
And, the Italians said a few years back that they have faster. They can move faster in the labs than the speed of light. That was, of course, incorrect. So the speed of light is still, the benchmark. So that's when you have synchronous replication, you have to keep the distance low. But Europe is usually smaller countries, and we don't need a bigger distance replication. So that turned out to be a massive seller for us over here in Europe.
Now, I've got to say, the technology-wise, we still need to sort out the speed of light. We need to figure that one out. Yeah, maybe
exactly. The Italians were wrong, so there you go. So
we'll do that next year.
Einstein is still right.
Nothing goes faster. So to finish off, obviously Proact has been partnering with NetApp for the last 27 years. I wasn't born, honest.
No, we don't.
I wasn't born. So let's finish off with, what would the ideal innovation for you be moving forward? What do you think? What would you like NetApp to invent in the next 5 years? What would you like to see change with the NetApp products? Per, would you like to go first?
Maybe a couple of things comes to mind. I think as much as I liked them, they've been a little bit wary on their object storage implementation or S3 compliant implementation on ONTAP. I think go all in, so make it a fully complete object. So customers have a true multi-protocol choice, and also where we see them, being a little bit. Investing, not investing, is of course the application integration of their snapshot. That piece has been up and down over the years. I think the focus is higher now because the world is moving on. There are new application, new requirements. So make sure that the because the snapshot, if you do it, it needs to be consistent. The data Absolutely. Needs to be relevant and usable and readable, and not just a copy of the data. And that's why the application integration, where there have been some hits and misses and focus and not so much focus. So keep focusing on that one and make sure you're on top of the modern application world.
Yeah.
In a hybrid cloud context, no big ask on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you do agree. That's probably a hole that they've been trying to plug for a long period of time. So certainly the application one. Good. Christian Lehrer, I appreciate, Christian, that this is not exactly your area of expertise. You tend to be security and ransomware Microsoft, etc. So, but is there anything in particular that you would like to see in inside storage arrays moving forward?
Security and ransomware protection.
Okay, fine. Yeah, okay, good.
No, I think really the storage and data protection part is so important, and it's important that systems that are used there are communicating with the security solutions that are in place, so that security consultants, SOC operations center, and whatever can really focus on getting the alerts, because we see, or the base, the files, when the file system and the software below that is recognizing changes there, it can protect with some file logs and snapshots and whatever, but they also can be one of the first systems to notify a company that something is happening that shouldn't be happening. So go on there and talk with the security experts all around the world, with all the other companies focusing on that, because it's such an important part of protection.
Agreed. Good one. Christian Mohn, is there anything that you'd like to see storage array wise?
Yeah, you've kind of mentioned it, not in the podcast, but you've mentioned it before, Tony. Do we at this point really need to have local storage arrays at all? In a way, is there a way that we could just provide a gateway to some flash storage somewhere, and you don't have a lot of spinning or not spinning flash disks on-prem at all, where everything you do is just run it through a gateway and it's stored somewhere else, right? Yeah. It might be a branch office that has that kind of gateway storage array to the main office. The main office might have that to the hyperscaler or to Proact for that matter, and something like that. And that by doing kind of storage-less storage in a way, you could also offload snapshots of that as recovery from ransomware and whatever on the local device each step of the way. So Absolutely. You offload your snapshots of the files that aren't really there, but they're presented to you. So making a kind of a virtual storage gateway in a way that doesn't require the power draw and the physical space that actual storage does require.
And technology-wise, it's kind of been done years ago.
Yeah.
But you're right, it doesn't really exist anymore. That we tend to sell. I know, appreciate the fact that these are storage arrays resell companies, so they want to sell their storage arrays. But more than with any other company, NetApp are software based. So you
exactly.
would think that there's a facility there to do that. Yeah. I suppose from my perspective, I'll go an easy one. I do agree with Per with regard to the fact that interface-wise, the world has moved on a little bit. If you look at some of NetApp's competitors, interfaces are an awful lot simpler for standard management, and NetApp could probably learn a bit from how that's done. But that's probably the way forward, because one of the reasons that NetApp were so successful early on was because they had a very straightforward interface for people to use. And I think interfaces, as we all know, play a massive part in how we live our lives. So I think it's something they can definitely polish. But okay, thank you guys. Really enjoyed this. Thanks again, Per, for joining in. Much appreciated.
My pleasure, of course.
It's been great.
You're off the hook now.
Yeah, that's it. You don't have to come back for a while. It's fine. It's okay.
Okay, this is it for the next few years. That's fine.